Another day, another video about Jakob Chychrun trade rumors, and I know I said the exact same thing, word for word pretty much, in yesterday's Patrick Kane video. Another day, another Patrick Kane trade video. It always happens like that. There are names that get tossed around everywhere, and when it comes to the conversations that are published on social media, there's discourse going around online. It makes for some very interesting video discussion fodder to put here on the channel. So, without further ado, we're going over to Arizona, and we're talking about the defenseman whose name has been on the trade market for a year and a half, a few months. It's been a long time. And I feel like we've been making videos about Jakob Chychrun forever now. But alas, the guy is still not traded. In fact, he hasn't even played in the NHL 22-23 season yet. He's still recovering. Now, just to get things out of the way here first, there were some analysts going out there, I believe on TSN, saying that some teams might want to see him actually get back into action first before they pull the trigger on some sort of a Chychrun trade and execute their best offer available. But with all things considered, we can still talk about Chychrun as an asset and what things he provides certain NHL teams that are acquiring his services. Chychrun is 24 years old, 6'2", 209 as a left-handed defender, and he's signed till the end of 2025, making $4.6 million a season. He's scored a boatload of goals, he has been a very good offensively minded guy, and he's got a very solid two-way presence as well. He's a top 3 defender on most NHL teams, a top 2 defender on bad ones, and if he is your number 4 guy on your team heading into the Stanley Cup Playoffs, you're likely in a very, very good spot. This is why, when it comes to the most popular NHL team around, the Toronto Maple Leafs, there are discussions as to whether or not Chychrun would be, or should be, or maybe even already is, on their radar. The reason we're making this video is because of an article published by Nick Kypreos on Wednesday. This is on thestar.com. The link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read it. How the Leafs could land Jakob Chychrun without trading away Jake Muzzin or prospect Matthew Knies. Muzzin can no longer be deemed a dependable top 4 blue liner for the Leafs. Chychrun is the answer, and they can't afford to wait, Kypreos writes. And yeah, it's Kipper that we're going out there and sourcing for this discussion over here. I'm going to be honest, I actually really do like Nick Kypreos. Now, I'm not the biggest Leafs fan, so I don't really relate to all of the rhetoric going around surrounding Kypreos and his journalism as to whether or not his takes are right or wrong or whatever, but there was a time in 2020 during the pandemic and the isolated at home periods where I was like, yeah, let's just watch Real Kipper at noon every day when it's 9 a.m. here in Vancouver and I'm playing World War II Call of Duty or whatever it is. So I always kind of have Kipper and his material in a near and dear place in my heart because he carried me through the summer of that year. But when it comes to the journalism that he goes out there and talks about in this piece, he pretty much writes, opening up the article about the Maple Leafs and their start to the season. How, so far, it hasn't really been the best start, but at the same time, it could definitely be a lot worse. There are some injuries, there are things with Muzzin and Matt Murray that have to be sorted out. And because Muzzin is out, and because he's not really a quote-unquote reliable 4th option anymore, it's painfully simple. The minutes that Muzzin would play need to be replaced, and it's time to go shopping for a defenseman now rather than try to wait it out. Patience is not a virtue here. A few different names are thrown around that happen to be pending UFAs. You've got Dumba, Severson, Klingberg. The Leafs trading for a pending UFA also runs the risk of another Nick Foligno situation for Dubas. How they traded a pretty significant price for Foligno and then he ended up leaving, which brings us to my point, Kypreos writes. Jakob Chychrun. In a perfect world, the Coyotes would have traded the defenseman yesterday. It's been made clear he wants to leave, and the Coyotes, they want him out. Chychrun doesn't come without his flaws. His injury history, for one. His body has been through a lot the last few years, surgeries in both knees, his shoulder, and most recently, his wrist and ankle. But he's just 24 years old, and youth is on his side. His feel for the game has also been questioned. Still, what he brings is relief to Morgan Rielly, who already carries the weight of the Leafs' defense on his shoulders. That weight just doubled with the absence of Muzzin. With Chychrun, Rielly would be able to pick his spots much better, which will improve his ability to defend. The next few paragraphs kind of go over what Chychrun is and why he's a valuable player. He scored 37 goals in the last 3 years. He's a very good offensive defenseman. And the cherry on top is you might not need to write off Muzzin's $5.6 million cap hit either. While other teams can go deeper with top prospects or young players than the Leafs can, the Coyotes have told teams like Toronto and Ottawa that if a trade involving Chychrun does not include prospects like Nyes or the Senators' Ridley Grigg, a deal can still be built around 2 first-round picks. It's a pretty reasonable price to pay when you consider Dallas just paid the Rangers a first and potentially a third-rounder for Nils Lundqvist. So, with this idea in mind, no longer touching some of the top-tier prospects on the Maple Leafs or the Senators, aka Nyes or Greg, and I guess for Ottawa there are some other names you could throw in there as well. There was Shane Pinto's name tossed around, but they're not trading that guy at all. Not a chance in hell they touched that guy's name. Heck, there wasn't a chance in hell they touched his name 2 weeks ago. What more now that he's scoring a whole bunch of goals for the Sens? But either way, it appears that according to Kypreos' insider information, there might indeed be some sort of mercy shown here by the Arizona Coyotes, saying, okay, we'll just build the deal around 2 first-round picks instead if you don't want to touch Matthew Nyes. My guess is, Kypreos writes, if the Leafs make a play for Chychrun, the Coyotes will ask for one of Sandin, Liljegren, or Topi Niemela. The Leafs would be wise to protect the right-handed shots. Since last June's draft, Bill Armstrong also said he's willing to absorb contracts for assets. To balance the money, Arizona would need to take Alex Kerfoot's remaining $3.5 million contract, and I believe they would. Some solid play out of Nick Robertson over the next few weeks would make Kerfoot much easier to unload. Now, if you believe that Muzzin can somehow work himself back in the mix this season, his current $5.6 million would still fit in with Chychrun's $4.6 on the books, protecting the Leafs' cap. By moving Kerfoot's contract, Muzzin's contract is no longer an LTIR factor. The piece then ends off by talking about how Dubas apparently likes Chychrun, and he is reportedly healthy enough in his wrist to join the Coyotes for practice this week. So for Toronto, this is a really interesting discussion because obviously Rasmus Sandin, Timothy Liljegren, and Topi Niemela, these are all pretty good and pretty solid young defenders. Sandin had the entire controversy about him potentially not signing, and he's the only left-handed guy amongst the bunch. But when it comes to Niemela and Liljegren, I do think that if Arizona is really shooting for the moon here, like, if you're putting me in the position of the Coyotes, I'm going for Niemela. I want to go all in on the future. I want to talk about guys that can help my team 5-10 years from now, and that won't be too much of a problem to re-sign anytime soon. I mean, Niemela's signed till 2025 on his entry-level deal, and he just had an incredible season last year for Karpat in the league, getting 32 points in 48 games. Now, this season, he hasn't had all too much of a hot start. He's at 3 points in 13 games at the time of recording this audio, but Niemela still has showcased a very high, tremendous amount of talent that transcended that of his draft slot in the 3rd round a few years ago. Timothy Liljegren is also on the IR, so he hasn't really played, but he has slowly, steadily become a lot more of a reliable option on the right side for the Leafs. And then, of course, Rasmus Sandin is a guy that a lot of people were expecting big things out of going into the next few years. So when it comes to the potential trade, I'm kind of going out there and saying, okay, if there's that first, or that double first, price tag already attached to it, plus Kerfoot, plus a Topi Niemela, I feel like if the Maple Leafs window really is right now, and you wanted to capitalize more so on Liljegren when he comes back, and you also still have Sandin, whom you just went through an entire long and egregious contract signing process with, maybe giving up on the future potential of a guy like Topi Niemela in order to acquire a Chychrun who helps you today would be the most beneficial move in the short term. I get that Niemela is a hyped-up prospect and a lot of Maple Leafs fans are going out there expecting big things out of him, but if you're really trying to capitalize on the window of opportunity that Dubas has built today, then you kind of have to put all your chips in for today. It's kind of just that simple. I feel like it would benefit most parties because Arizona would want that long-term youth and depth. Maybe get a guy like Niemela who's good enough to play in the NHL by the time you're moving out of your Arizona State University arena. He doesn't help out your team right now. You get worse when you trade away Chychrun. You lose more games. You get Bedard. Simple formula, isn't it? So, talk to the comments on your thoughts about this idea thrown around by Nick Kypreos on the Toronto Star, or is it the Star only? I'm not too sure how journalism platforms in Ontario work, but I do believe it is the Toronto Star. If not, it was the Toronto Star at one point. Might just be the Star now. But either way, talk to the comments on your thoughts about the article that we discussed in this video. It will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and read it yourself. There's a lot more that Kipper talks about, a lot more tangents that he writes that support the ideas he's writing about, so go ahead and check it out. It's a good read. But talk in the comments if you're a Leafs fan. What do you think about these prices here for Jake Chychrun? 2 firsts, a Kerfoot and a Niemela, or a Liljegren, or a Sandin. Is that too much? Do you walk away from that? Do you say yes? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.